Hello and welcome to Good Morning UK, Have Your Say, a Force for Good's mid-morning show coming to you live from our nerve centre here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow, with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie. This is the weekly show where we are British, we love the United Kingdom, and we want to stay together. And hello to everybody who is coming in on our platforms. To Debbie, who was first in this morning. Good morning to you, and to Alan and to Adam. Always good to see you guys, and Tommy as well. Hope you enjoyed what we sent you there, Tommy. And good morning to Rita and to Barry as well. Always good to see Barry and Robert Kennedy. And to Christopher also. A bright British good morning to you, Alistair, and to you too, and to everybody who is watching, and to everybody on TikTok, on the TikTok camera. This is Scottish Unionist and Indy chat. Send in your thoughts. We're going to be talking about, has Boris gone woke? That's one of the things we're going to be mentioning. What's your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on the Welsh Assembly voting for the passports that are being brought in? And what are your thoughts about the current state of the country right now? Bill says, Rule Britannia. And that's something that we always like to say. Rule Britannia, great song, written, of course, by the Scotsman James Thompson. And Dennis here says, I'm Scottish and proud, but very proud to be British. Sturgeon is killing Scotland along with our culture. Adam says, Unionist parties are always voted down in Holyrood. Well, we know that. Yes. And Robert says, good morning from Hamilton. Great town of Hamilton. I stood there as a candidate once back in the 1990s. Always remember that. And Tommy from Newcastle. Hope things are good in the great British city of Newcastle this morning. John T. Boy says, Nicola is very shifty. That's for sure. Good to see Andy Jackson here. And other people here coming in on TikTok. Fantastic. Give us your thoughts on TikTok. And please do follow us on TikTok as well. Debbie says she's disgusted with the Welsh Assembly. Well, what was it? It was 28 votes to 27 to pass these passports. And the only reason that it was not a tie was because one of the Conservative members couldn't get his Zoom facility to work. Now that seems extraordinary given the fact that Zoom is perhaps the easiest software to use in the world. So that was very confusing and surprising, and also just a bad reflection all over on the general state of British democracy. For crying out loud, you know, remember like 18 months ago that if you wanted to vote, you had to actually be physically in the parliament. Now you can do stuff by technology and you don't even have to turn up. And that totally ruins the whole idea of the cut and thrust of debate that we're meant to have in these parliaments. It breaks my heart to see empty chambers, whether that's the British Parliament or whether it's any of the devolved assemblies. To have these empty seats there and as if we're still being governed is simply not correct. We're not being properly governed when the actual MPs or MSPs or members of the Welsh Assembly are not actually sitting in the building arguing with each other. And what we've seen today is yesterday was a vital vote in Wales being lost because somebody could not get his Zoom camera to work. For crying out loud. I even saw somebody on Twitter this morning asking, was that actually intentional? You know, who knows? Who knows? Sabina says she likes Wales. Well, absolutely. Wales is a lovely part of the United Kingdom. I went there on holiday once, and it was a fantastic country. Bill says, I read the Nats are reporting your posts. Well, yeah. I mean, we publish across all platforms, of course, and we do it so regularly and so well and so convincingly that the Scottish nationalists really get upset, but they basically they get upset, but what they do is they report us for absolutely no good reason whatsoever. And consequently, you know, the algorithms, the computers, you know, take posts down and stuff like that, which they should not be doing, of course, if you believe in freedom of speech. But that's just where we are, I'm afraid, with the folk who do these sorts of things. Okay, so I am just going to share some of our material here over to other sites. Please do so yourself as well if you can, folks, because it really helps to get the message out, you know, if we can get the message out. So please do share. If you're on Twitter, here's what you can do, right? You can forward with a positive quote tweet, and when we see that positive message in the positive quote tweet, we will retweet you to almost 27,000 people. Okay, so give us a good shout out on Twitter, and we will retweet you to 27,000 people. Absolutely. So let's look at some of the comments here that are coming in. Well, Adam says something there. He goes, Plaid Cymru, SNP and Sinn Féin must be scrapped. Well, that's certainly easier said than done, and I'm afraid it's the ideas that need to be challenged. The ideas of breaking up the United Kingdom. That's what needs to be challenged. That's what we need to set our hearts and minds to doing. And of course, that's what we do. That's what we do today. Lee from Glasgow says, bought and sold for English gold. This is on TikTok. Well, that's a very old piece of nonsense, of course, which rhymes. That's about the only thing that you can say about that. It rhymes. Kevin Mullen is coming in with a comment there. Witchfinder General says that with the Tories in power, the UK is over. That's on TikTok. Let's hope you're wrong about that, but let's hope that the Tories and in fact Labour can stand up strong for the United Kingdom, because that's what we need. And talking about that, a new document was published last week by the Conservatives. Now, we have not read it, although we have read a part of it, and we were very pleased to notice that one of our phrases is being used prominently. Now, I'm talking, of course, about our phrase that the United Kingdom is not simply a family of nations. It's much more, and quite literally, a nation of families. And the Conservative Party have picked up on that because, of course, it's a great phrase. We make up brilliant phrases, and they should pick up on a lot more of them. But they've picked up on that, and they're really pushing that now. Celebrate a union that grows stronger every day, says Michael Gove. Well, I'd like to think it was growing stronger every day. That we certainly must need to set our hearts and minds to that particular goal. But he wrote here, he said that he described the Union as a family of nations and a nation of families. We should celebrate our vision of a prosperous, progressive and dynamic country that has adapted over time and will continue to do so. A country that champions the robust institutions in which we take such pride and which reflect the distinctive traditions from around the United Kingdom. Well, good words, good words. What we need to ensure is that these are put into action, because I notice this a lot with politicians of all stripes. They're good with words, but when it comes to action, it's like the words are not connected to any levers that can actually make action happen. So words without actions are kind of irrelevant. They're better than nothing, But at the end of the day, you have to have the ability to actually implement the good words that you're saying. And that's where so many politicians and so many parties crumble, is because there's no actual physical connection between what they think they believe in and what they can actually do. Bill Baxter says the Nats love our TikTok. They certainly do, don't they? Don't they? Absolutely. Somebody says you sound like Ewan McGregor on TikTok. Ewan McGregor, well, very possibly in his train spotting incarnation. Fortunately, the UK government will simply deny a further referendum on TikTok there. Well, thank goodness for that, because we pro-union people do have a mandate to hold the United Kingdom together. The obvious mandate, of course, is 2014. In 2014, the overwhelming number of people in the United Kingdom voted to keep us together. The overwhelming number of people in Scotland voted for the United Kingdom to stay together, I should say, and that, long may that continue. So we have a mandate to hold the UK together. Adam says, let's hear some nationalist comments from TikTok. Quite a few of them, but they're not actually saying anything at the moment that we want to read out. Kenny asks a good question, though. Why do the Nats get so angry when confronted with the truth? Well, the truth hurts, I think. The truth hurts. And that's what bugs them a lot. And, of course, they often don't hear people confronting them with the truth as well. Connor Quirk says, do you have a job? Yes, I do, Connor. This is my job. I am a full-time unionist superhero. This is literally my job, Connor. And people ask me that all the time, and I keep telling them, yes, this is my job. Saving the United Kingdom is a full-time occupation. And Alan wonders, what would the Nationalists say if the Tories were not in power, if it was Labour, for instance? The Tories gave the Scottish Nationalists the opportunity, he points out, for the referendum, a chance for them to win it. They lost it, and they should have indeed have at least thanked the Tories for giving them that opportunity, says Alan there. And yeah, time to... Well, Martha says something that a lot of people often think. Time to abolish Holyrood for the health and safety of us Scots. Well, there was a party that stood at the Scottish election on the regional list called Abolish the Scottish Parliament, and it came 10th out of the 25 parties that were standing at the Scottish election back in May. So there's certainly a number of people who want that, but certainly not enough to actually translate that into any kind of overwhelming number of votes at the ballot box. That's been shown, because that party, Abolish Holyrood, actually stood in every region. So everybody in Scotland had the opportunity to vote to abolish Holyrood on the second ballot paper. And as I say, it came 10th out of 25 parties. It has some interesting unionist theory in it, though, and I don't know if its website's still up, but it's worth checking out. Mackenzie says, do you think the SNP is a dangerous cult? I'm going to answer that, and then I'm also going to answer Lee's question. Do you really think Westminster truly cares about Scotland? Because that is a good question. I'm going to say that the SNP has cultish elements of it. Definitely. Some people are... I'm not going to say it's a cult. It is a political party, obviously, but there are cultish elements of it, such as the worship, the adoration of the dear leader. That's a very strange thing that you don't often see in British politics, but you certainly see it in Scottish nationalist politics, and that's very unusual. The adoration of the leader. which is undoubtedly something that the Scottish Nationalists have. Do I think that Westminster truly cares about Scotland? I think there's an awful lot of MPs who don't understand what the Union and what the United Kingdom even is, Lee. I do believe that. I do believe that there's not that. And we've been dealing with MPs at Westminster, all 650 of them now, for almost 10 years. And we have come to the conclusion that an awful lot of MPs don't really understand the United Kingdom and indeed what holds the United Kingdom together. And that's quite disturbing. And not just MPs, but all their advisors as well. And that brings me on to a very important point that I wanted to bring up anyway. Because on the front of the the national newspaper the other day, there was somebody pointing out that it wasn't sustainable for Boris Johnson to continue to deny, as he put it, the Scots, as he put it, a second referendum. And this person called Kieran Martin was, believe it or not, the former Constitution Director at the Cabinet Office, and he was one of the people who put together the so-called Edinburgh Agreement, which was signed by Cameron and Salmond. And it's clear to me, though, as I read Mr. Martin's points of view, that even though he was Constitution Director at the Cabinet Office, he doesn't understand how the United Kingdom is held together. Okay, and I'm about to tell you how the United Kingdom is held together. The United Kingdom is held together by people voting for MPs to be sent to the Union Parliament in London. Okay, and so long as people continue to vote for MPs to be sent to the Union Parliament at Westminster, then they are giving a mandate for a British-wide United Kingdom to continue to exist. And if you don't want the United Kingdom to exist, then the democratic way of emphasising that is to vote for candidates who are abstentionists. And whatever you may think of Sinn Féin, and we certainly do not like them, they at least understand that point. And so people will vote for them and they will not go to the Union Parliament, because they don't want the UK to continue to exist. However, so long as people continue to vote for the SNP and send SNP MPs to Westminster, then they are giving a mandate for the Union Parliament to continue to exist and to continue to govern the United Kingdom on behalf of all the people of the United Kingdom. Okay? So that's how it's held together. It's held together by voting for MPs to be sent to the Union Parliament. But so many people at the Union Parliament, as Lee said there at Westminster, don't understand that. MPs don't understand that. And blooming Constitution Directors at the Cabinet Office don't understand that. And they'll even come out with saying things like, I underlined it here. He basically says that the Tories, by denying a second referendum, are saying that Scotland doesn't have the right to leave. Oh, well, absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense. That's not the case at all. Once a majority of the Scottish electorate are voting for abstentionist candidates at a British general election, then you can talk about there being sufficient democratic desire for Scotland to break away. But until that happens, which will be years and years and years, if ever, from now, then you cannot say that democracy is being denied. I had to get that off my chest. Oh, because I just don't like to see people who should know better write stuff that's just nonsense. Oh. Okay. Good. How's things getting along on Twitter? Once in a lifetime generation, forgot that meant 7 years exactly. Moldwich says it's is working on opinion polls. Oh, if 50% want a second referendum, let's have a second referendum. No, 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 no. No, you can't run a country, and the United Kingdom is a country. You can't run a country on opinion polls, and that's another terrible thing about modern politics, is that the politicians just look to the daily opinion polls, and believe me, opinion polling is a black art of the blackest hearts. And you can make people and believe anything with an opinion poll, and you can shift views with cleverly worded opinion polls. It is a dark, black art, and quite frankly, ideally it shouldn't even be involved in politics. Opinion polling, it's a terrible, terrible intervention in the democratic system. I'm totally opposed to it. I mean, literally, you could have an opinion poll to move people to do anything, and we've seen that in the last 18 months. Okay, so opinion polls are just terrible. And no. Just because 50% think something today on an opinion poll, you work on them for a couple of years and you'll get that down to like 10% if you ask the right questions. So no, we don't give any credence to opinion polls at all. Although, of course, we understand very much these are the way that modern politics is misused and exploited and run in the wrong directions. Ian's saying there, as a separate option which was not in conflict with other parties' votes, perhaps a Polish Holyrood would have got a great many votes. Possibly, Ian. I know that's an interesting point. Mr. JC says, most opinion polls are being opinionated from specific individuals from specific parties. Moldwich says, we're not... yes, so we're not allowed to change our minds. You most certainly can have a mind of your own, Mr. Moldwich, and I hope that you do. And but what you're referring to there is whether or not a country should be run on constant opinion polls and referendums every few years. You can't run a country like that. The country will just destroy itself, because it's like a child not understanding what it wants today or this minute, but then wants tomorrow. You know, it's just like you're just literally running confusion. You're just running a country on confusion. Constant opinion polls, up and down with ideas. Let's have a referendum on this, let's have a referendum on that. And at the end of the day, it also comes down to who's got the power to convince people at the referendum as well. You know, who's got the money, who's got the media. You know, it's a terrible, terrible way to run a country, is opinion polling and referendums. Absolute disaster. The best way is voting every 4 or 5 years and take it from there, which we've sort of got. Richard says, we are a unitary state, but devolution and the disastrous dog's breakfast of Dewar and Cameron has introduced total confusion. Before Devo, it was clear that we were one nation first and plural nations secondarily. That's so. As we always like to say, we're not so much a family of nations, we're a nation, one nation of families. We're not so much a union of nations, we are a nation of many unions built up through time. We are one big country. The United Kingdom is our one big country. And the Scottish nationalists, of course, will not accept that, because they don't want to accept that, because they know if they accept that, then they're going to have to face the idea of actually destroying that one big country, which is not such a nice thing to do. They prefer just to think of themselves in their own part of that one big country. But we like to think of the one big country, about keeping the United Kingdom together. Ross says, when will this Indy nonsense end? It's not about the government. Unionism is more than that. It's people unifying. Yes, unionism is about the unity of the people. It's about solidarity, not separation. It's about unity over division. It's about, as Ross says here, the country of Britain, the music, the culture. We are one nation. Absolutely, absolutely. Well said, Ross. And Alan points out the geopolitical angle here, that China, Russia, and France, no doubt, are happy to see, indeed want the UK to split, because if it splits, then it's going to make it easier for Russia and the Chinese to dominate the planet. Totally, the Scottish nationalists don't have that geopolitical conception of life. You know, they're just happy to imagine that other people will sort that out for them, and they can live in their own little world, as if the rest of the planet doesn't exist, as if they don't have any responsibilities to the future of the rest of the planet, which is sad way to be. Isa says, Britain is not at all at the same level as China or Russia in terms of international influence. I'm afraid you're actually very wrong there, and I'm going to show you exactly where you are wrong, Isa. And we pointed this out in our wee book for the Union, which I suggest that you get, and we'll put the link up there if we can. But every year, the Henry Jackson Society does an audit of geopolitical capability. And in 2019, this was published last year, in 2019, out of all the major powers in the world, after the United States as the greatest global power, the United Kingdom was second in front of China. And that's because international influence and power is not necessarily measured by how many soldiers you've got, not necessarily measured militarily. It's also measured economically. It's also measured through other metrics, such as what's called soft power, which is about cultural and linguistic and technological influence upon the rest of humanity. And in these soft power elements especially, Britain really does rank right up at the top. So in terms of geopolitical influence, the United Kingdom is just as powerful as China, and considerably more powerful than Russia, which has, when you think about it, very little cultural or soft power influence upon the world, even though it may be a powerful state as far as things like the military are concerned. So just helping to set that right there, because that's another thing that Scottish nationalists will always come up about. They'll say, oh, people like A Force for Good are living in some sort of past when Britain dominated the world through its Royal Navy and things like that. However, it's all relative. It's all relative, and it depends upon the day and age that one is born into. And power is measured in different ways. So while it was true that back in the Empire days we certainly dominated physically through the influence of our empire and navy, and we were the world's leading power for a long time, for about 100 years, up until the First World War destroyed all of that. But for those 100 years known as Pax Britannica, or British peace, we dominated the world as the most powerful nation. But today we still are right up there as a powerful nation as far as all sorts of geopolitical measures are concerned. And I mentioned there the Royal Navy, and on this day in British history, a Scotsman was born called James Gordon, and he went on to have a 75-year career in the Royal Navy, which he joined when he was 11 years old, which you could do in those days. Yeah, he was born on the 6th of October in 1782 in a place called Kildrummy, which is in Aberdeenshire. And he was the last, when he died, he was the last of Nelson's captains. And he had joined the Royal Navy at age 11 as a midshipman on HMS Arrogant. HMS Arrogant. That was a good name. HMS Arrogant. And when he died, he was Admiral of the Fleet. He died in 1868. An incredible 75-year career. And you know, you've heard of Hornblower. There used to be a television series about Hornblower, who was a kind of dashing Royal Navy officer. Well, it's said that Hornblower was modelled on the Scotsman James Gordon, although he may also have been modelled on the other Scottish Royal Navy officer, Tom Cochrane. But certainly James Gordon is in with the running for being the model for Hornblower with his 75-year career in the Royal Navy. And we've got a picture of him here, actually. I'll just bring him up so that you can see who I'm talking about here. There he is there. The real Hornblower, the life and times of Admiral Sir James Gordon. James Gordon, great Scottish and British admiral. Born on this day back in 1782. And people say, well, why do you always concentrate on history? Well, we concentrate on history because we recall to memory the past in order to better understand how we got to where we are, which helps us to understand who we are, and that also helps us to understand what responsibilities we have going forward to ourselves and to the rest of the society that our ancestors have created. And we talked quite a bit about that in our wee book for the Union. We have a narrative, an overall story, which helps us to understand how we came together. Going right back 5,000 years into the past, we go right back here, right back to the Ness of Brodgar, settled some 5,000 years ago, which was, quote, the beating heart, the beginning, the capital, the wellspring of Britain's very first common culture. The Ness of Brodgar in Orkney. And it was Neil Oliver who called that Britain's ancient capital and the hub of ancient Britain, which spread its Neolithic architecture and stone monuments throughout the British Isles. And these cultural links ultimately became social and economic links, which ultimately became regal links, which ultimately became political links. And so that's why we trace the Union, not just back to 1707, but going right back to the regal Union of 1603, going right back to the English and Welsh Union, going right back to our social and cultural unions in the midst of time. In the midst of time. That's how long it has been. So, what else happened on this day? Well, on this day, 2018, A Force for Good and Our Thin Red Line was in the Royal Mile because the Smurfs were having their first major annual outing, which was a march down the Royal Mile. And we were there, as 40 odd of us at least, with our flags standing up for the United Kingdom. And the Smurfs, otherwise known as the SNP supporters, we call them the Smurfs because looked at from the air, all you see is just like little blue people. So they were walking down the Royal Mile, and when they got to the bottom, they declared that there was 100,000 of them. But unknown to them, we had actually videoed them, and counted them, and we counted 12,789 of them, not 100,000 at all. But, you know, Scottish nationalists are sometimes a little bit gullible, and so they do listen, as going back to the earlier question about the cult, they do believe what their leaders tell them, and so if the leaders tell them that was 100,000, they won't necessarily use the benefit of their own eyes, they'll just believe it. But 100,000 would have taken a pretty long time to pass down the Royal Mile. It would have taken hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. And they certainly wouldn't have all fitted in to the bottom area there outside Holyrood. Anyway, that was also on this day. Now, we've got our competition coming up right now, which is for this fantastic little tin of sweeties with a Union Jack on it. Now, folks, this is the last of this series of tins that we've got, so we're not planning on necessarily getting many of them back in for a long time. But if you can answer this question, which I shall put up right now, if you can answer this question, please send in your answers to contact@aforceforgood.uk. The first person to answer this will get that tin of sweeties sent to them today. So please, it doesn't matter if you've entered before, but if you haven't entered before, please try it. Simply just go to send in your email at that. And the question is, on this day a Scotsman was born who became the last of Nelson's captains. He was the last of Nelson's captains to pass away. And he was born in Aberdeenshire. And it's said that the Horatio Hornblower series was modelled after him. So what was the name of the great British Scottish admiral who was born on this day in Aberdeenshire? What was the name of the last of Nelson's captains? Please do send that in to contact@aforceforgood.uk, and we'll announce the winner at the end of the programme. And no, it wasn't it wasn't Alex Salmond. Yeah, we've put up there a link on our Facebook and YouTube and Twitter channels, which is an accurate count of all the Scottish nationalist marches that we've attended. And you can see from that, we date it right back to Dumfries, when they told us there was 10,000 in Dumfries back in 2018, when in fact there was less than 2,000. Right up to last weekend. 2 Saturdays ago, when they told us there was 5,000 marching around the bottom of Arthur's Seat, when in fact we counted them at 847. So please, folks, it's so important that you get the truth, because if you don't get the truth, then you actually believe that the Scottish nationalists are much more powerful than they are. Okay? And that's their aim. They're trying to tell us that they're more numerous than they are. But they're not, okay? I mean, in 2019, they marched up the Royal Mile, and they said there was 250,000 of them. There wasn't. There was 11,286. But if you believe that the Scottish nationalists are actually 22 times more numerous than they say they are, then if you're a unionist, you're going to get a bit depressed at that. So it's very important. It's very important that there's somebody there to stand up and give the truth, which is exactly what we at A Force for Good are all about. We are all about the truth of reality, okay? Not the Scottish nationalist lies, quite frankly, lies. Now, folks, if you're watching on TikTok, please give us a follow. Please give us a follow. We want to get these numbers up there. Tommy says the only 100,000 the SNP have seen is the pounds they've fiddled away. Well, that's right. What's happened to the 600,000? Colin says, is the wee book for the Union on Kindle and or audible. No, it's not. That's a thought, though, Colin. It's a thought about whether or not we could put it on Kindle. Um, what we are doing this week is we're ordering a third edition of this, because it's virtually almost sold out. You'll still get a copy if you order today, but it's going so well that we've had to order a third edition, which is fantastic. The third edition won't be any different from that. It won't be any different from that. It'll just be exactly the same. It'll just be another big print run. So yeah, thanks. Bill says you should make an Amazon store. We've tried that, Bill. We've tried that, but it's actually quite expensive to do now on Amazon, and we thought that it might not be worth our while at this stage. But it's a good point. We are on eBay, though. We are on eBay, and we do have a store on eBay where we also sell the wee book. Yeah. So, just looking at the comments here on TikTok, Ross Clark says Scotland keeps voting in an SNP government. Well, we don't call them a government, but okay. Shouldn't they be allowed to carry out manifesto pledges? Yes, they most certainly should be allowed to carry out a manifesto pledge, but not to break up the United Kingdom. Not to hold a referendum to try to break up the United Kingdom, because that's not in their devolved competency. If Britain was a federal state, it would be likely that that power would have been given to the Scottish nationalists to hold such a referendum. But thankfully, Britain is not a federal state, so the SNP cannot just do things. Even though it's put stuff in its manifesto, it can't necessarily do them unless it's got the legal authority to do them. And thankfully, they can't break up the United Kingdom, for good reason as well, because it's not just Scotland, as we always say here. It's not just Scotland that's involved. The whole of the United Kingdom has a stake in keeping the whole of the United Kingdom together. You know, Scotland can't just go away and do its own thing any more than England, Northern Ireland or Wales can just go away and do its own thing without regard to the greater family. So there has to be certain powers which are central and which are collective and which are made manifest in the collective central parliament, such as we've got, thankfully, at the British level. Yeah, exactly. Alan says, how can they have a manifesto pledge, pledging to use something they have no power over? Indeed. But they'll do that in order just to create confusion again. It's like opinion polls. It's just a means to create confusion so that people think the SNP said they were going to do it. Why can't they do it? Without people looking into the deeper level, which is, of course, they can't do it because they don't have the legal power to do it, because the legal power to hold the United Kingdom together is vested, thankfully, at the British level, at the British parliamentary level, where it should be, because the British Parliament is the Union Parliament. It is the Parliament that decides what happens to all parts of the United Kingdom, and it can decide that because it has members of Parliament from all parts of the United Kingdom who all go to that to vote for the good of all parts of the United Kingdom, not just their own little bit. Tommy says the SNP have ruined Scotland, and there's certainly a lot of people who would agree with you on that, Tommy. Why? I'm not even going to read that one out. Hoggy1690 says, is it the wee book I should search for on eBay? yeah, if you put in "We Book for the Union," you should get us. If you put in "A Force for Good," you should get us. That's a good point. What we're going to do is ensure in the future we've got an eBay link specifically to this, but it's up there. So search for that title. You should get it. A Wee Book for the Union. Thanks for asking, Hoggy. And Stephen Murray says a question which was asked last week: why don't you call them a government if they're the Scottish government? Well, let me explain. A government is a government of an independent nation. Okay, it has to have the powers of an independent nation before you can properly call it a government. The SNP does not have the powers of an independent nation, so why do they call themselves a government? They call themselves a government because they can. Back when Alex Salmond took over in 2007, they were called properly the Scottish Executive. That name properly described the constitutional relationship between the British Parliament that had created it and the devolved competencies which it had given to the Scottish Executive. There was no suggestion that this executive was on any kind of par or any kind of level with the British government and Parliament which had created it. Of course, Alex Salmond didn't like that, so he just simply changed the name. When he got power, he changed it from Scottish Executive to Scottish Government to imply that it was on a par, that it was somehow equal and opposite to the British government. And of course, that was again confusion, to confuse in people's minds the correct constitutional relationship. So we saw his trick, and we've never gone along with it. And it's, as I say there, it's not accurate anyway. It's not accurate anyway, because you're only a government if you've got the powers of an independent government, which the SNP or whoever would happen to be in charge of Holyrood does not have. And as British Megan points out, it's a devolved assembly. It's a devolved assembly. It's not on a par with the British government, and it was never meant to be on a par. Mr. JC asks, was James Gordon a Jesuit? I do not know. That's why would you ask that? I don't know. Bill says that the Westminster should pass a Clarity Act to rename the devolved assemblies to, no doubt, to properly explain the constitutional relationship. That would be a good idea, wouldn't it? Yeah. Nelson gives us some good news here. He says the SNP used to hold their meetings in the local hall in Fraserburgh. They now hold their local meetings in someone's garage. The support is still dropping up there in the northeast. And Ian comes back as well about the manifesto pledge thing, and he says they should not be able to carry out manifesto pledges outside their jurisdiction, any more than they can raise taxes in France, even if their manifesto says that they should. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Does Diane Abbott count the marches? Connor asks an interesting metaphysical question. When you're dead, will the UK care? No, they won't, so stop caring so much about politics. Well, politics Some people might not be interested in politics, but the thing is, politics is interested in you. And so it's something you can't really escape from. And some people are better at dealing with it than others. I suppose some people have more of a stomach for politics than others. But as I say, you know, it's okay to say I'm not interested in politics, but remember, politics is always interested in you. And we see that at the present time, especially with the system Britain-wide promoting all sorts of things which are, we believe, not congruent with our history. You know, all of these so-called passports and all that sort of stuff. It's not congruent. It's not in alignment with our rich tradition of freedom and liberty. And that's something that should concern all of us, and no doubt concerns more people with each passing day. You know, yeah. And so Stephen asks again, why is it called the Scottish Government? Well, because legally it got changed to that. Okay, what happened was Alex Salmond changed the name just because he could, but he couldn't write it into law. And then the stupid Tory stroke Lib Dem coalition came along and they fell for his wee ploy. And so when they brought out the next Scotland Act, which was the 2012 Scotland Act, they actually wrote it into law that was the new name, which of course was a massive confusion of the issue. A massive confusion, because what it did was it made everybody think that the Scottish Parliament was on an equivalency with the British Parliament, that somehow the Scottish government had the same powers as the British government. And so that was a massive confusion that went into people's heads, and that really soiled the whole constitutional debate and confused many people who believed that, well, if Scottish government is equivalent to the British government, why isn't the Scottish government independent? So Salmond actually, you know, got a major victory there, and the Unionists at Westminster severely compromised the integrity of the United Kingdom. And that goes back to Lee's point: do the Westminster MPs care about the UK? They don't care enough to know enough about how the United Kingdom is held together, and so they're constantly fouling up, and they're constantly falling into the Scottish nationalist traps that are being laid for them, and as a result compromising the integrity of the United Kingdom. We're quite willing to point out the flaws, which are many flaws of the British governments to date in their often useless attempts to try to hold the Union together. So, but our job is to guide them in the right direction, to point out to them how the United Kingdom is held together and what sorts of things that they can do about it, which brings me to our upcoming 40-page bumper issue of Union Heart. Now, Union Heart, of course, is our regular magazine, or occasional magazine, I should say. And it's usually 8 pages, but upcoming is going to be 40 pages. That's going to be coming out at the end of autumn. And that is going to be lots of policies to hold the United Kingdom together. And that will be free for everybody who's a monthly donor. So if you're a monthly donor, we call them our union supporters, then you'll be able to request a free copy of our 40-page bumper issue, which is going to be called Do More Together, because it's through doing more together that you bond, whether you're a couple, whether you're a family, whether you are a village, whether you are a nation. Doing more together is what bonds things and which brings you together. So we're going to be full of ideas for that. That's coming out at the end of October. So if you're a union supporter, we'll put up the link there if you'd like to become a union supporter from as little as £5 a month really does help us, really does help us to keep going, because we've got a lot here that we need to cover. So yeah, also just want to give a shout out to this A4 poster here that we've got done, which is an absolute cracker. That's an oil painting of, that's myself actually, standing above Loch Lomond in the background. And we've had that turned into a glossy A4 poster, and you can get that at the link as well that we'll put up. And you can also get a much bigger version of that in the background is A2, so you can get that as well. And you can get that, what I just showed you, as an A2 poster as well. It's a real cracker. I didn't paint them, no, but supporters painted them. One supporter painted that in a watercolor, and another supporter painted this in an oil. And they're also available as greetings cards as well, if you want to wish somebody the best of British because it's their birthday, or because they've done something worth congratulating them upon, or thank you cards, whatever. Check out our cards, which you can get. We've got 4 different versions at our shop. The Jersey's Blue says the Scottish Government only have limited power. That's absolutely correct. That's why it's not correct to call them a government. Message coming in there. Let me just check what's that says. And so yeah, the quiz is let's find out who won the quiz. Absolutely. Let's find out who won the quiz. Now, the question for this was, who was the Scottish Royal Navy Admiral who was born on this day back in 1782, and who was the last of Nelson's captains? And we do have a winner, I'm glad to say. And let me just bring up who the winner is. The answer was, of course, James Gordon, who had a 75-year career in the British Navy, joining at age 11. And the winner is Guy Hancock. Fantastic. Well done, Guy. This will be winging its way to you this afternoon. So look out for that in the next couple of days. And that's the last of those prizes. So we're going to have to get some new prizes in for the weeks to come. Well done, Guy. Guy says awesome. Good stuff, Guy. Glad you're happy. Alan says well done, Guy, as does Tommy, and as does Richard. Congrats, Guy. And Tommy Scott says congrats, Guy. Catherine says congratulations, Guy. So congratulations to this week's quiz winner, Guy Hancock. Hope you enjoy your sweets. All that poster needs is a Spitfire, says somebody. Well, do you know what? This week we've ordered a Battle of Britain flag, which has got 2 Spitfires on it. So we did that in order to ensure that we've got good stuff, maybe even to hang there in the back on suitable days to commemorate the RAF. Bill says, a great guy. And Guy is a great guy. He absolutely is. Colin says, do we write down legal errors as we come across them and put them on a website where MPs, etc., can refer to them? We sort of do that. We don't actually do it in that precise way, but we're always conscious of where mistakes are made, and we'll write an article or a Facebook post or something about it. And next year we're going to have an actual book coming out as well, where we're going to examine all of those sorts of misconceptions and get them into a hard copy. That's going to be a really, really good project for next year. But the project for this year is our 40-page bumper issue of Union Heart, which is coming out at the end. And Bill likes the flags. He goes, they are nice. Sorry, he likes the posters. They are nice and patriotic. And that's so true. You know, if you're an artist, and if you can paint or whatever, just have a look at our website, have a look at our social media. You'll see a lot of good patriotic pictures of not just a force for good, but of other things that we're involved in. And if you can paint those, please do, and please consider it, because that's what it's about. It's about creating a culture of unionism. So we didn't hire anybody to do these particular paintings. These just came as gifts, which was lovely, absolutely lovely. Yeah, Debbie says, congratulations, Guy, and thank you, Debbie, as well. Thank you. So, folks, this is the end of the show. Tom says he's from Northern Ireland and he's a loyalist. He's on TikTok. Gaza says, well done, Guy. That's on TikTok. And yeah, people do care, because lots of Scottish nationalists are on this show, which we're glad to say, on TikTok. We call it Scottish Unionist and Indy Chat. We'll be on TikTok every Wednesday at 10:30 to 11:30. Please give us a follow, whoever you are, on TikTok. We love all our followers, even the misguided ones that we're attempting to bring to the light, of unionism, to spread the good word about how great the United Kingdom is. So please do give us a follow on TikTok. And folks, thank you for watching on YouTube, on Twitter, and on Facebook. And we will be back next week at this time. So it just remains for me to say, God bless the United Kingdom, and God save the Queen. We'll see you next week. Take care.